Welcome to our Interesting People in Interesting Times live chat. I'm Dennis Stearns. Today I'm delighted to have a great, um, energetic person to talk about the future of one of our technology accelerators that we're excited about, the Internet of Things, Kelly Woods from Intel. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, Dennis, thanks so much for having me. Thanks all for joining me this afternoon. I'm excited to talk to you about something that I'm passionate about and have been working on for quite a number of years, IoT or the Internet of Things.
Yep. Well, we'll get into a basic tutorial and then maybe some more advanced concepts around Internet of Things in the future. I mean, it's a huge area, but I wanted to start out with this quote, which, by the way, for anybody who's interested, there's just a lot of really interesting quotes about Internet of Things that are out there from very smart people that it's going to be changing a lot. But this particular quote says it's not just about putting RFMD tags on things, on dumb things, so smart people can track them. It's about making the things themselves smarter. And so I think you're going to have a few examples of those today. So looking forward to it. Let's just dive right in.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again. I'm going to provide an introduction to IoT, which is also starting to be referred to as edge computing. And so I'm going to talk about why IoT is about connecting the physical world to the digital world and what that means. I'm going to talk about the evolution of IoT and why it matters, why you should care, specifically focused on business outcomes, and then talk a little bit about what's in store for the future. IoT has evolved quite a bit over the last several years, and it's really moved from hype to reality. And so I want to talk a little bit about that and give you all some examples. So before I move in, just a little bit about me on the next slide. Not a ton, but I have been in information technology space for products and services for about 20 years, 15 at Intel, and the last 6 years I've been focused on the Internet of Things business at Intel and really looking at our go-to-market strategies. So I mentioned before, I've seen a lot of evolution in this space. And I've seen a lot of evolution at Intel as well, moving from a PC-centric company to really a data-centric company. And so Intel is really all about intelligence everywhere. And our vision and our mission is really to bring game-changing technology to improve and enhance the lives of every person on Earth. And so when we talk about IoT, we talk about this significant growth space. But before I get started, I thought I would give a little history story to provide some context around IoT. So this story is about Madame Marie Curie. I'm sure many of you have heard of her. And in 1914, in World War I times, there were many soldiers that were wounded on the battlefield. And they needed to be treated where they were injured. They didn't have time or resources to move all of those soldiers to a hospital or to a central location to take care of them. So Marie Curie invented a mobile X-ray car, essentially, where she was able to get X-rays out to all of those wounded soldiers on the field so she could treat them on the field. And she actually was able to deploy over 20 of these X-ray, mobile X-ray vehicles. She was able to do over 1 million scans during these battles in World War I, and she was recognized as a World War I hero and was the first woman to achieve and be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And so what that means in context of IoT is we talk about connecting things to the cloud. And in this case, if you go to the next slide, Bill, in this case, when you talk about devices and things, you could think about those as the soldiers in the field, and you could think about the hospital as the cloud or data center. And when we're able to connect devices to the internet and then into the data center, you're able to understand what's happening in your physical environment. And the closer you move that data to where the data is generated and do the compute closer to where the data is generated, the faster you can respond and react and predict what's happening in your environment. So the definition of IoT is really a system of connected devices that can share, store, and process data with each other in the cloud. And as I mentioned, IoT brings compute closer to where the data is generated. So if you look at trends over time, and you look at the history of IoT, it really started out as connecting things. And there were initial projections of 30 billion connected devices. And the first IoT connected device was actually a Coca-Cola machine in 1982. And it was a vending machine, and they essentially connected it to the internet so that they would always know what the inventory looked like in the soda machine, and what the temperature was in the soda machine. So they could essentially not have to go check the soda machine. You could just read the sensor, read a dashboard, and know if it needed to be refilled. Then we moved from just connected and being able to understand what's happening in the environment to things being smart. So as Dennis mentioned before, these RFID tags and putting that compute in the inventory, suddenly you become to understand what's happening, and you can make predictions. And so for an example, in a factory, asset management is a huge expense, and all of these big robotic arms are very expensive. And if you can monitor those robotic arms and you can see based on the data that they're creating, if they're starting to wiggle or create higher vibrations, you can predict that something's about to fail before it fails. And if you're able to do that, you can prevent downtime in the factory, you can increase worker safety. So things started to become smarter and you start to be able to predict. The next phase is autonomy. And we're moving into that phase, and I'm sure many folks have seen, a lot of the robots and autonomous cars are really starting to come online. And that's really about these machines being able to apply artificial intelligence, which is increasingly becoming much more prevalent. And then these cars can start to think for themselves and they can start to learn over time. And so we could do another session on artificial intelligence if you'd like, but I'll keep it pretty high level today. But essentially, these cars can learn based on driving, and then there'll be zero accidents because there won't be any human, failure. And also we look at a term called Industry 4.0, which is all about the self-regulating factory. So not only does the factory predict when a robotic arm is about to fail, but the whole factory can run with virtualized software, which regulates all of the systems and can make sure that the factory is operating at the utmost capacity. With the highest levels of efficiencies and the highest levels of cost savings. So when you start to connect things to the internet, whole new doors open up in terms of what you're able to do across industries and businesses. So as I mentioned, you can predict trends in supply chains, which has been a really big deal during COVID-19 as an example. Folks in retail locations need those, those essential items. And so supply chains are able to predict those and get those into the hands of the retailers and their customers is very important. Healthcare, transportation, factories all benefit from having all of this data and understanding their physical environments. Making better data-driven decisions for efficiency. So I talked about factories, and I'll give some more stories in future slides, to kind of give you more of an example and context around that. And there's also opportunities to create new business models for service and product delivery. So there's a lot of opportunity when you start to understand how a physical environment is operating, and then you can start to predict and create whole new ways of doing business that were never possible just with, that human manual labor, if you will. So if you want to move to the, sorry, just question?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, Callie, that I was reading an article in MIT Technology Review, and they were talking about how if it was 10 years from now to have a pandemic, not only would the supply chain be smarter and talking to different elements of the supply chain, but all the hospitals would be smarter. And all the complaints we've had about we don't have the right kind of data, and we don't have, and it's very spotty and uneven data. This article was basically saying if it was 10 years from now, it would all be seamless, and we'd have much better real-time ability to deal with the crisis that we're in.
That's so true, Dennis. The more things get connected, the more data we have, but the ability to get the insights from that data is still very, very low. And so that's where Intel's really focused, and a lot of businesses in the industry are really focused on. Sorry, guys, I got a security thing come up. My apologies. Okay. So
hopefully we didn't say anything that your company was worried about.
Yeah. Yeah. Stop her now. No. Lost my train of thought. But anyway, yeah, I'll just jump to the next slide. So, so in terms of IoT being at the center of our changing world, there are a lot of statistics that analysts are sharing in terms of, the size and the growth of the market, which I think are really relevant to understand the gravity of IoT. And IoT is unique in that it's very complex, and it's still growing in capability. I'm so sorry, I keep getting these things. It's still growing in capabilities. And so IoT takes many companies to actually deploy an IoT solution. So when you look at, from Intel's perspective, we're a silicon provider, but there's software, there's applications, there's services, there are OEMs that create systems. So a lot of folks need to come together to make an IoT solution. But essentially the industry is a $300 billion industry this year. And I'm talking about the business aspects of IoT. So this is across industries in B2B space. Another point that I think is really interesting to mention is the amount of data that's going to be generated and processed outside of the data center is half. And so when we talk about historically, all of the data was sent to the data center, and that's where analytics was done. All of that compute, as I mentioned in the Marie Curie example, is moving closer to the edge so that you can make decisions in real time, and you can save, costs, time, etc., to be able to make those faster decisions. And so I think those are two really important indicators of the value of edge compute or IoT and where we're headed with this technology.
So Kelly, many of our listeners, when they hear the word automation, their brain immediately goes to, oh, that's going to be some jobs that are lost. But this industry is actually creating a lot of jobs too. So what's your sense of what might be lost versus what might be created in the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, that's a great question and a big concern with automation and IoT and edge compute. Most of these jobs that are being replaced are being replaced with new jobs and new jobs that are higher value jobs. And so it actually, to your point, Dennis, is creating more jobs than it's eliminating. And a lot of the jobs that it's eliminating are jobs that we no longer have those skills to fulfill. So those are a lot of more historical types of skills that are harder to find, quite honestly. And IoT is actually helping with employee morale and employee longevity based on employees feeling more of a commitment and an investment in the jobs that they're doing versus something that's maybe a little more remedial. So it is creating more jobs than it's losing, but it is taking away some jobs, without a doubt, and it's absolutely a concern, but it's creating a more efficient and modern future.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Lead in on that hot potato issue.
There are several for sure. Okay, if we want to jump to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about more on how it's transforming the way that we live and work. So you can look at examples just from about everywhere in life, from improving our quality of life with education. So students now are able to have much more interactive educational experiences with technology that really brings their lessons to life, and the content and the access that teachers have to that content in creating those lessons improves the engagement level. I tell you, if I learned history the way that they teach it today, I would know so much more about history. My trivial knowledge is terrible because I just memorized everything because I had to know it for the test and I forgot it. But now they really immerse you in these experiences and you really learn from history. And so it's really proved to keep children in school longer, keep them more engaged, higher grades, all that kind of great stuff. If you look at protecting the planet, IoT is used at predicting weather patterns, understanding, crops, and understanding, soil vibrancy, and how it's being watered. And so there's so much going in terms of energy savings as well from a protecting the planet perspective. We talked about optimizing productivity and driving efficiencies in factories, and I'll talk a little bit more about that with an Audi example I have next, but lowering costs, increasing public safety. IoT is helping retailers open their doors and get employees back to work and shoppers back in the store using temperature monitoring systems. So, I don't know if many of you have been out to dinner or to a restaurant or to your gym where they take everybody's temperature as you walk in. You have to stand there and have your temperature taken. But there are devices that you can deploy which will tell the store where they are towards occupancy, how close they are to hitting their maximum occupancy, whether or not folks are wearing face masks, what the temperature is of folks. And so a lot of these technologies are allowing folks to return, to work, retail, their jobs in a more safe way, and making sure that these organizations are meeting compliance, essentially. So if you want to go to the, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, Kelly, that in preparation for this, some of our clients who had seen the invitation said, well, how can we invest in this? And the answer is they're actually already invested, and a lot of the technology companies are already investing in this, but also, I think you've just pointed out, there's almost no industry that won't be able to adapt this and adopt it and be able to improve productivity as a result. And that's just from the investment side. I mean, again, you've given some examples on how it can help our health and a lot of other things.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And we've actually seen the acceleration of investment in technology because of COVID. So when, retailers or other industries were maybe a little bit reluctant to invest, now seeing how they have to be able to pivot and, pivot their supply chains, pivot to serve customers, that type of thing, pivot to be able to have all of their employees work from home and have the network bandwidth to do that. They've realized that, you need to have that infrastructure and that edge to cloud capability to be able to continue to thrive and survive in a changing world. So absolutely, it's very prevalent and is continuing to grow. And it's a huge market, as you mentioned. It's not just one or two companies. We always say it's not just one company that makes IoT work. It's the software developers, it's the system engineers and the system builders, it's the system integrators. It's the Intels that power all of these devices with with CPUs and with silicon. So most likely you are investing in IoT even if you don't know you are directly.
Right. Yep. Great.
Okay, so a couple of stories. I really like storytelling. I think it provides a lot of context and credibility, right? So there's one thing to say, put compute in a device and you're gonna, be able to change the world. But these are a couple of examples that I thought would be interesting and fun to share for everyone. So the Sinclair Hotel is the first all-digital hotel, and we worked with them to really create a connected hotel. So this is a essentially historic landmark in Fort Worth, Texas, and they went in and gutted the whole thing and built it all from the ground up, connected. So it has power over Ethernet. All of the rooms are automated. All the rooms have virtual assistants where you can interact on your bathroom mirror. You can check out, like, attractions or where to go eat, and all the lighting and everything is all personalized and customized. So it's a really exciting guest experience. But it's also very highly monitored and run in terms of operational efficiency. And one thing that's really exciting about it is the environmental footprint. So they've been able to, through the use of IoT and monitoring, making sure that rooms lights are dimmed and the temperature is set right and isn't set too high or too low. They've been able to reduce their energy by 35 to 40%. So it's a significant, not only great experience, not only well run, but also good for the environment, essentially. Audi is known for their precision engineering, and they really put themselves in the position of leading with technology. And we worked with Audi to essentially automate their inspection of their welds. So in one of their factories, they have 1,000 cars that go through the factory a day, that get assembled every day. And they didn't have the resources, the human power to be able to inspect all 1,000 cars, which each have 5,000 welds on them. And so what they would do is they would take one car off the factory line, and they would have 20 engineers circle around the car with their clipboards, and they would inspect that one car, and they would consider that a sample for the day. But they really wanted to be able to inspect every single car. So what they did was very complex, but they installed IoT technology and cameras, essentially, which were automated, that could inspect every single weld on every single car. So they were able to inspect 100% of the cars versus only one of the cars. And they were also able to reduce their human resource costs and reallocate those human resources, reallocate those engineers. Instead of having those engineers check welds on the cars, those engineers were able to spend their time innovating for future car development. The next story is GE Healthcare, and GE was able to take artificial intelligent technology and put it on their existing X-ray machines, and so they were able to, at the edge IoT with their X-ray machines, triage patients really quickly. So when you get an X-ray, you have a technician that does the X-ray. And with this artificial intelligence, they are able to prioritize high critical care patient conditions. So essentially, for a pneumothorax is a collapsed lung. And with this algorithm on this X-ray, if a patient, which this is pretty common, has a collapsed lung, that scan would get prioritized and sent to the radiologist first versus going in at the bottom of the pile. So you essentially shrink the time from a radiologist seeing a scan from hours in a queue to seconds, which saves lives. And so it's exciting to see how technology, right at those technicians' fingertips, they're able to say, hey, this is a high risk case, essentially. So those are 3 stories to kind of give you an idea of what's possible with IoT, with some outcomes and facts across hospitality, manufacturing, and healthcare.
Yeah, very nice. Well, I suspect that a few folks, when they were hearing about the hotel, were also thinking about, okay, is this system actually watching me in my hotel room? So I'm guessing you have security protocols built in so that doesn't happen.
Absolutely. Well, there aren't cameras in the rooms.
Okay.
So the rooms have sensors for lighting and bringing down the shades. But that is definitely a valid concern. And security is a very big deal in IoT. And it's actually considered kind of table stakes, right? If you don't have security, then it's a no-go. So security is extremely important, and you know, all companies that are in this business take it very, very seriously. There's also, along the same lines of security, is privacy. And what IoT does allow is, by not sending data to the cloud, you're able to keep that data on premise. And so you can keep that data private without worried about sharing it outside of your network. So that's another benefit of IoT and doing compute at the edge.
Well, that was going to be one of my next questions because
I beat you to it.
yeah, some years back we ran a series of technology workshops for our clients, and one of the things we talked about was back when horses were being replaced by cars. Everybody who had a vested interest in horses talked about all the worst things that would happen when cars came in, and I mean it was doom and gloom all around. And so every time we have major leaps in technology, the same thing happens. And so I think cybersecurity is one of the major concerns of the world today. So I think you just said, well, yeah, but if you maintain it as a private network, you've actually made yourself more secure. But what
You
about?
Yeah, you haven't opened your data up to be able to be available to other parties, essentially. So you do have the privacy benefit when you keep the data on premise.
So when you get into the bigger, longer term issues, including autonomous cars, self-driving cars, where that data is being shared out in the world, I mean, is that a bigger issue? I mean, I just read an article that's saying that, the potential savings in lives and insurance costs and a whole bunch of other things from self-driving cars would be great. We have a few clients who have opined that they really like driving and they
Mhm.
prefer to drive themselves, and they've seen technology break and they don't like the idea that technology could break while they're driving. So there's all those issues in there. But I mean, from the cybersecurity issue, I mean, what's your take on that?
Oh, I mean, it's definitely a concern, right? I get notifications too often that some part of something that I'm involved in has had a security breach. It is definitely a concern. Um, I'm not really here to do a commercial for Intel, but you definitely need to have all those levels of security built into your infrastructure. So hardware security built into the silicon, as well as the software security. And you need to make sure that all your systems are secure, and it will continue to be a very big deal. And like I said, I think the industry takes it very, very seriously.
Eh, Yeah, so I just got a text from a client who wanted me to ask, and again, you can defer this question if you want, because it's another
Okay.
hot potato. But would you trust a chip that was made in China?
Oh my goodness, that's a big one. Oh goodness, I don't know that I'm going to go there.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
But yeah, it is. I mean, I'm sure everyone's read all the news, right? And the Wall Street Journals on IP and some of um, the stories and things that have happened in terms of technology providers in China. And so it's always a fine line, but you have to maintain the highest of integrity. And so I really do trust. Well, I trust that Intel does that for sure, and who we do business with, and making sure that we're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. But it's a good question.
Okay, well, carry on.
Okay, so this is actually my last slide. And I just really wanted to reiterate, the magnitude of the opportunity with IoT and how much it's growing. And even if you don't really, hopefully you understand what it is now, but if you didn't understand what it was before, you can see how prevalent it is, and how much it's growing. And I just wanted to reiterate some of the statistics and data facts that analysts are sharing in terms of, you had mentioned before, Dennis, on the number of enterprises that will be doing IoT level data processing by 2023 is 70%. I would even guess that it's higher than that, but those are numbers that we're willing to stand behind. And I have everything sourced in here as well. If you guys would like more information, you can certainly read the full reports. Artificial intelligence is just growing significantly. And you see artificial intelligence. It's extremely fascinating how machines can learn, and how machines can learn quickly how to be like the best chess player in the world. It's scary, but the opportunities, if done correctly, are tremendous in terms of being able to take mundane tasks that humans aren't really good at because they get bored or tired or whatever. Machines can do them, with 100% accuracy, hour after hour after hour after hour. But applying AI, and 43% of AI will happen on edge devices by 2023, which is really significant. It's not all happening in the data center. It is happening at the edge to automate factories, retail stores, hospitals, all that kind of stuff. And then again, the amount of data, it just blows my mind that the amount of data that's going to be generated by IoT is more than half of the data in the world. So that's really significant as well. And as you look at, data is like the new fuel. Data is the intelligence, and data is what drives the economy. Getting the insights from that data and really being able to harness the power of that data is so important. And so being able to have, the compute and the intelligence to do that gives you just incredible insights and new business opportunities. And so really, it's all about resiliency and business transformation across all industries. So I mentioned before, pretty much any industry you can think of is benefiting today, and will benefit more from IoT or edge technology.
Well, that is huge numbers you have there, and not like 10 years from now. It's right around the corner.
Right.
Yeah. So again, I think one of the takeaways here is it's not just the data, it's the ability to have actionable intelligence that's curated so that you can quickly make better decisions.
That's exactly right. That is so right. We have oodles and oodles and zettabytes of data, but the amount of data that's actually being, curated and understood is a small fraction of that.
Yep.
So
Well,
there's so much opportunity in that.
well, that sounds like one of the great opportunities of the next decade, or maybe the next 3 years. So we do have an audience question about how IoT and 5G, whether there's connectivity to those two.
Yeah, definitely. So, so I'm not an expert on 5G. I should be. My company is. But 5G is essentially a whole new paradigm for networking, and it's taking networking pipes and just making them just unbelievably capable of just handling tremendous amounts of data. And one thing that we didn't talk about is the amount of video data. So data used to be that goes to data centers used to be all structured data. And so data centers could really handle it because they knew the type of data that was coming. Now with IoT and video data, it's like all these different formats of data that all need to be orchestrated and put together and understood. And so 5G really allows for that massive ability of data to be able to be transmitted and understood. So it's essentially opening up more capabilities for IoT and more capabilities to make the network smarter. So we talk about the edge or the devices, you talk about the network. that all of the data runs through, and then the data center, and all of that is smart and connected, and having that common architecture across all of it is really important to be able to be resilient, and have the ability to pivot and understand your data.
Okay, so here's one that is a little different. If you were advising your high schooler on the opportunity, because you mentioned that there's just all kinds of different things, software, hardware, integrators, and so forth, how they would go into college and prepare for this huge opportunity, how would you advise them?
I think a lot of the opportunity is in the software applications. So as we become more and more a software-defined world, and we look at how to run, how to be nimble, right? And I'm trying to figure out how to say this without getting too technical, but we talk a lot about virtualization, and we talk a lot about how you can run a bunch of stuff, if you will, on one single device. And so the example is an iPhone. So you can think about a factory environment or a retail store or a hospital, and think about them as having one platform in their retail store, let's say, for example. And if it's like an iPhone, you've got this phone, and you used to have a camera, a navigation system, a phone, all these different things. Well, now they're all software, and they all run on this one device, right? And so software is really what brings the hardware to life, and really what brings the capability. And so at Intel, we're very focused on enabling software developers, making sure that our architecture is open sourced and available, so that you can derive the most innovation on top of the architecture. So software is really the differentiator, but you need the high performance architecture and technology to be able to make all that software possible.
So they should get a degree in software?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you want to do. I wouldn't want to be a software engineer, but that is where a lot of opportunity is, or in system integration. So if you're looking at it from a technical perspective, I'm a business person, so
okay.
Yeah.
So opportunities up and down the food chain. So another question, which I hadn't even thought of, but one of our audience asked, how might IoT apply to financial planning, if at all?
Oh, goodness. I know that it does. And you should have given me these questions before. I could have prepared some good answers. Maybe I can circle back on that. But absolutely. I mean, what IoT is able to do from a trends perspective, and analytics and looking at data over time. I know there's algorithms and stuff like that. That would certainly help with financial planning.
Yep. Well, and so again, some of the tools that we're using, some of the resources we're also exploring, being able to use in the future, do have some of this embedded. So that's where it gets tricky, because the Internet of Things, some people are thinking, well, that's my refrigerator talking to my toaster. And it's way beyond that.
It's way beyond that. I don't really even look at the consumer space. I'm really focused on B2B. But there definitely are the smart homes and the devices, and you can set your temperature, or your whatever you call it in your house, air conditioning or whatnot, and monitor that from your phone, or lock your doors. And I think the whole Ring system is really cool, from Amazon, where you can see what's going on. Yeah, my house got TP'd the other day, because my kids get TP'd all the time. And my neighbor sent me a video from his Ring doorbell. So the kids that were TPing my house. So kind of interesting.
That is interesting. So one other audience question, what is the biggest threat or danger related to IoT, in your opinion?
The biggest threat or danger? I mean, I think that the whole sci-fi, robots taking over is definitely scary, right? When you think about how smart we can make computers and how smart we can make things, we definitely need to, do the right thing in terms of putting the parameters in place and all of that. I really don't think robots are going to take over the world, but that's the first thing that comes to mind. In reality, I can't really think of any other threats. I see a tremendous amount of opportunity. And we're gonna continue to see major shifts and things that we just didn't even fathom were possible, like Uber and some of those types of things, like just a it's not just about iterating and making things a little bit more efficient. It's these major changes in business models that you just like, you can't even imagine life before them. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot of those things. So I don't see it as threatening, but
Okay.
I could be biased.
Well, and I know that you can't share with us any of the gee whiz things Intel's thinking about for the future, but it's clear that you're excited about the possibilities that are out there.
Yes, yes, and Intel's definitely excited about this space. As I shared the numbers in terms of growth and how we're a data company, and the growth of data, at the edge, and the growth of all of these, north of 50 billion devices that are being connected. It's just mind blowing. So,
And that's 50 billion when?
I think it's 2023. Um,
2023, okay.
yeah, so I can go back and look at the data on my slide here.
Yeah.
I think it's 2023.
So it's probably some crazy number beyond that, right?
Oh, well, I mean, for a long time, when I first started in IoT, we were saying 30 billion devices. And, the industry has been, growing at double digit CAGR, for the past number of years. And so, yeah, so we were initially saying 30 billion, and I can't remember what the date was, but in the slides, it's now at 50 billion, and I want to say it's 2023. So just in years.
So some folks in our audience may not know what CAGR means. Define that for them.
Oh, it's the pace of growth. You do a better job of that than I will. Compounded, what is it? Compounded annual growth rate? Is that what it stands for? I'm trying to go back to my business school days. I just say it now and don't really think about, how to define it.
Yep, good. Well, so exciting things. We appreciate you coming on and sharing a lot of, both what it is, but also about the future. And appreciate the energy that you put into this. And my suspicion is if we have you back, maybe it won't be 3 years from now, maybe sooner, but that there will be a lot of other exciting stories to tell.
Yes, absolutely. I am always good for a story. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And I'm particularly interested, I'm interested in a lot of it, but I'm particularly interested in the future, how it can help healthcare. And that's one of the things I hear through our network people in healthcare, that this could be a major game changer, way beyond having mobile X-ray cars in World War I, which I'm sure was considered a game changer back then.
Yes, it's true. And healthcare is obviously a vertical industry that we focus on. If you're interested in following our leader in healthcare, his name is Dave Ryan, and he runs the healthcare business, and he would be a great person. He's all over the place on, Twitter and webinars and blogs and stuff like that. But telehealth is growing, like gangbusters right now, and, people really like it. So the convenience is very nice. So being able to have those devices and have telehealth and not have to travel is a big deal. And then also, folks being able to be monitored and not have to go into the hospital all the time is both a, not only a convenience, but it's also really, restful for folks that, that are challenged. So yeah, lots of opportunity in healthcare for sure.
Yep. Very good. Well, again, thank you, Kelly. And for all our audience, this is as usual taped and will be available on our SFG YouTube channel for viewing or sending to your high schooler who might want to know more about internet or a future career opportunity. And thank you all for watching and hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, everyone.